Grace moved through the silent med bay of the frontier station Atlantis ring she kept, her voice low and calm as the doors sighed open, and the gurney rolled in. On the bed lay an alien woman with skin like silver dusk and eyes like stormlight. Her name was Sira, and her breath came thin, and Weekmagan helped wheel the gurney to the bright table. Lily checked the monitors and looked to Grace. The readouts showed a fall in pressure and a strange pulse rhythm. Sira had been pulled from a wreck near the outer docks after a blast split the cargo hull. Grace was a junior on deck, but she had a steady heart. She saw fear in Sira, and she saw a will to live. The kit on the wall held human blood units for emergency use in the chaos. The supply of the non-human serum was gone, only human blood remained, and time ran short. Grace offered her own arm to the donor port. Megan said the rules did not allow cross-species use without a clear match. Lily said there was no time for paperwork and no time for doubt. Sira looked up and held Grace's gaze. There was a light in those storm eyes that asked for trust without a single word. The station shuddered as the outer ring sealed its blast doors. Alarms sang through the metal like low thunder. Grace focused on the tube line that ran from her arm to the filter and then to Sira. Each beat of her heart felt like a small promise sent across a narrow river. The rhythm on the screen steadied. Color returned to Sira's lips. Her hands stopped shaking, and her eyes cleared. She whispered a soft thank you in a voice that sounded like rain. Then sleep took her in a gentle titifer the next days. Grace visited when her shift allowed. She read out loud from her pocket tablet, though she did not power the screen. She spoke simple stories from memory about sunlight on Kansas wheat and wind across an Ohio lake. She told Sira about Megan, who laughed like bells, and Lily, who always found lost things. She told her about Brooke, the chef who could make hope out of flour and heat. Sira listened and learned the names and the sounds of the station. She said she served once on a long ship that never landed. She said her people carried seeds in the blood. She said the seeds woke only when they found a safe shore inside the body. Grace did not understand, and Sira smiled in a warm way and said that safety is a kind of lighten. The fourth day, the station chief arrived with a stern face. The report on the cross-species transfusion had reached command. There would be hearings, and there would be forms, and there would be long words in tight rooms. Megan stood by Grace, and Lily stood by both. Sira sat up and spoke in that quiet rain voice and said that a life saved is a law above laws. The chief left with eyes that were less hard than when he came after. The chief left. Sara took Grace's hand. Her fingers were cooler than human skin, but strong. She said that the seed in her blood had felt the light of grace and had woken. Grace thought Sara meant healing, and she smiled. Then Sira placed Grace's hand on her own belly, and her gaze grew bright and careful. Grace felt a low tremor under the palm of her hand. It was not pain and not illness. It was a small pulse, like a new drum, finding its beat. Megan saw the look on Grace's face and asked if she felt it. Lily closed the door and dimmed the light. Sira explained in simple words. Her people carry a promise in the blood. The promise waits for a signal of safety and care. When the signal arrives, the promise becomes new life on her ship. The promise comes from a bond between two who guard one another on the station. The promise felt Grace's gift and believed the world was kind, so the promise began to grow. Grace sat very still. She thought of rules and of risks and of the strange beauty of the unknown. She thought of the moment when Sira looked at her with storm eyes and trusted. She thought of wheat and of lakes and of bells and of lost things found. Again were tests and scans and more long words, but the truth was simple and quiet inside Sira. There was a new rhythm that had not been there before, not made by touch and not made by heat, made by care and courage, and a bridge of blood words spread along the ring in whispers. Brooke sent bread shaped like little moons. Zoe from dock control brought a thin blanket woven with star-like threads. Nora from waste cycle brought a plant that grew fine white leaves. Ava from Cum sang a lullaby during late watch. In the weeks that followed, the medbay became a small garden. Syrah walked slow circles under soft lights. Grace walked with her and spoke about small things that make a day. The taste of cinnamon in morning coffee, the hum of the big air pumps when the night shift begins, the way Megan always ties her hair the same, and the way Lily always loses her pen and then finds it in her own pockets. Amidst the station shook when cargo ships docked hard sometimes. The alarms cried for a few breaths, and then went quiet again. Sometimes the chief came by and stood in the door and did not talk, and sometimes Syrah would take Grace's hand and place it on her belly, and they would both stand in warm silence. Evening, the lights went dim in a slow way that meant power save mode. Outside the big window, the planet turned like a blue stone. The stars hung in a calm way, as if listening. Syrah told Grace the old story of her people. In that story, a river ran through a desert, and the river learned to carry seeds for a long time without losing them. The river found a valley, and the seeds woke and made shade for the river, and then the river sang. Grace asked if Syrah feared the hearings that would still come. Syrah said, "Fear is a shadow that moves. When the light moves," she said. The new rhythm in her belly was not a shadow, it was a morning. Chief returned with 2 officers and a stack of tablets. He said that Rules Guard lives, and that Grace had broken a rule. He said that intent matters. An outcome matters, he said. That the station would not lose a medic who gives her own blood to a stranger in need, he said. That new rules would be written for old problems, and that sometimes the first draft is written by the brave men. Laughed. Like bells again, and Lily found her missing pen again. Brooke baked loaves, shaped like little boats. This time, Zoe taught Syrah the dock hand wave, and Nora taught her the trick of folding a blanket so it never slides off. Ava recorded Syrah's lullaby and sent it to the quiet hours channel on night. The alarms were real and hard aflare from the planet. Sent a wave of bright particles that bit at the shields. The station shook and lights flickered, and the medbay window showed a storm of color. Grace held the bed rail while Syrah stood beside her with a steady face. Megan ran checks and Lily locked cabinets, and the chief called all clear after a long breath of waiting. The storm passed. The new rhythm was still strong. Syrah smiled and said that storms test the roots of a tree. Grace rested her head on the rail and felt the long, slow pull of Perseus. The days turned into a quiet string of small good things. The hearings finally came. They were shorter than anyone expected. The decision called the act extraordinary and necessary under threat, and aligned with the duty to preserve life. Grace kept her badge, and her post Sarah kept her place among friends who had become a kind of family. Near the end of the season, the medbay garden was moved to a small room with a wider window. A soft chair sat by the window, and a low bed sat near it. On the wall hung a simple cloth with shapes that looked like rivers and seeds. Wait. Brooke said it looked like bread dough under a towel, and everyone Lafitte. Syrah took Grace's hand and led her to the chair. She guided Grace's palm to her belly once more. The small drum beat steadier now than ever before. Grace felt her eyes grow warm. She spoke in a voice almost as soft as the light. She said that courage sometimes looks like paper and tubes and a quiet yes. She said that she did not know what would come next, and that she would not run from it. Syrah leaned her forehead to Grace's. She said that her people have a word for the kind of bond that opens doors where there were none. She said the word means we keep the river clear, and we share the shade. Outside the window, the blue planet turned, and the stars listened inside the room. The new rhythm played on, and the station Atlantis ring learned the shape of a wider kind of family. Cycles later, visitors would pass the window and lower their voices. They would see the cloth with rivers and seeds. They would hear the soft beat from inside and feel the stillness that follows brave choices, and they would know that on a hard day in a far place, a human gave a part of her life, and a stranger trusted in something. New Bagangris would still walk the long halls, and Syrah would still teach the wave at the docks. Megan would still laugh, and Lily would still lose pens and find them again. Brooke would still make hope out of flour and heat, and the new rhythm would grow strong enough to carry its own light. If anyone asked what had changed the most since the blast near the outer docks, Grace would say that fear had learned to share the room with love, and that both had learned to be quiet. She would say that the station had more gardens now. She would say that people pause more often to listen, and she would say that a promise in the blood is a real thing when you feed it with Corin. The end, there was no grand speech and no loud trumpet. There was only the slow, honest work of each day, and the knowledge that a bridge built in need can hold the weight of a future. That is how Grace would tell it, and that is how the ring would remember it.